Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's Prophecy Update. As always, it's our desire to bring the events that are happening in the world from a biblical perspective and also a prophetic perspective. So thanks for joining us this week. What we want to talk about this week is what Joe Biden did and the Biden administration did this last Friday. And I've entitled this message, Comply or Explain Your Shame. I'll explain to you in just a bit what that title means. But folks, as we have been studying and we've been watching what's happening in the world, we understand that the Great Reset is here. I don't have to go into it because we've been talking about it. I just did a conference with Lamb Lion Ministries and we talked about the whole Great Reset. And anyway, it's being used to destroy the governments, the nations around the world to implement a Babylonian system. And now America has been targeted and America now is being used, our system is being used now to usher in the Great Reset. And they're destroying what America was and ushering in this new America, this Babylonian America, along with what's happening in Australia and Canada and all over the world, Europe, and all over, the globe, basically. The Great Reset is a global thing. It's to usher in the Babylonian system. And we obviously know they're destroying countries in many different ways, including America. They're coming at it in all different types of forms and fashions to destroy each sovereign country and then reset it to the Babylonian reset. Anyway, we just want to highlight one aspect that just got introduced into America last Friday. And if it hasn't been introduced into your country, eventually it will. And so, again, remember the prize for the globalists was America. And so now they're single-handedly taking it down through the Biden administration. They're pulling the strings of the Biden administration to take America down. And basically what the Biden administration came out with last week will exponentially speed up the Great Reset here in America and then eventually around the world. And so we want to talk about that today. We want to look at the different aspects. But basically what happened was with the Biden administration, they came out with basically a 40-page document that talked about a roadmap to changing our economy to suit the national security threat, the existential threat of global warming and greenhouse gas emissions, the whole hoax about that, right? And they're going to basically create an economy that's based on counteracting global warming. Now, you can probably imagine all the craziness that's going to come from that. But this is what they're trying to implement, and they're going to implement, and we need to be aware of it. If you want to see what's all in the document, all you have to do is just go to whitehouse.gov and you will find the information there. You can read it for yourself. It's a 40-page document. And so let's go back a few years to where a lot of this began, obviously with the Paris Climate Agreement that came about in, I think it was 2015, if I'm right on my numbers. And remember, Trump got America out of the Paris Climate Agreement because it gave trillions of dollars to these fools to redistribute wealth among third world countries and would basically bankrupt the United States. Well, anyway, of course, Biden gets in there and he gets right back in it. And so this Paris Climate Agreement, which siphons money, trillions of dollars off of first world countries, if you read this, and Glenn Beck, who pointed this out on his radio show. And again, I'm not advocating Glenn Beck as a spiritual guide because he's a Mormon, but they did some investigative research and found out that in Article 2.1c of the Paris Agreement, that it mandates countries to make financial flows consistent with a pathway towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilient development. Now, with that being stated, that's why Trump wanted to get out of it, because you have to give all this financial money towards eliminating greenhouse gas emissions, CO2 emissions, and being climate resilient. I mean, whatever that means. Basically, it's doing stupid things for a fake problem, basically. Okay? That's basically what this is. Well, anyway, Beck made some interesting notes about this, and I want to highlight that. Again, I'm not advocating Beck's theology, but the folks at the Blaze did some good research on this, and I want to bring it to light to you guys and then tie it in spiritually. So he notes that at the same time, his research staff found that when the Paris Climate Agreement was having its meetings, coming together, that at the same time, the world's biggest banks and financial institutions came together at the same time to basically talk about altering global finance in accord with this whole, existential threat of global warming, which it's a hoax. It doesn't exist. It's a made-up problem, guys. It's fake, okay? And so when all the countries of the world were getting together doing this thing in France, so were the banks talking about the financial aspects of it. And so that included the World Bank and the UN. And basically what they did, his research staff found out, was that they outlined the UN Nations Environmental Program Finance Initiative. And basically what happened at that meeting, at the same time the Paris Climate Agreement was happening with countries, it brought together about 230 banks and insurance companies to draft a methodology or a roadmap that would pressure the private sector businesses and corporations, the mom and pop companies around the world, to the will of the government by using banks and financial institutions and lending institutions. So they knew they could not push anything legally on corporations or small businesses or whatnot. But what they did is put pressure that we're all getting in on this. And this is to combat, global warming. We're all going to get on this. And basically, if you don't conform to what we're all doing here, then you're going to be ousted out of a job, out of any businesses doing business with you, getting loans or whatever. And they got the banks and the lending institutions to go along with this. So now this is what part of the Great Reset in the economic elements is that they've got together, they have the roadmap of the new economic system they want to employ, which is based on trying to curb global warming, and basically saying if you don't comply, then we're not going to play ball with you. We're not going to do business with you, and you're going to be ousted. You're going to be isolated away from everyone else. So it's nothing that they're putting on legally anyone, because they know they can't legally put anything on somebody. But what they can do is just say, we're not playing ball with you. And basically these companies who don't play ball are going to go out of business. That's what's going to happen. And so you have to understand, they have figured out that they can't legally put this on corporations. It's basically coercion, and the carrot they're dangling out in front of them is this. If you comply with us, you'll make a lot of money, because those who won't comply with us are going to be put out of business. You'll have more consumers, and you'll be able to monopolize the market that you're in. That's the carrot they're dangling out in front of the corporations. And so in the process of this is why when they shut everything down, it put the mom and pop stores out of business. And they want to continue to do that to anyone that doesn't comply. Okay. So basically, if it's not a legal thing they're putting on, then what is it? Well, they're shaming you. They're shaming these businesses. Oh, don't you care about the planet? Don't you want to save the planet? Don't you care about animals? Don't you care about rising sea levels? Don't you care? How could you be so heartless? Mother Earth is groaning. Gaia is growing. That stupid creation worship stuff that they're putting out there. By the way, again, I have to reemphasize this. Man-made global warming is a hoax. okay? And they've had to change the name because now you're seeing global cooling, and so now they have to talk about climate change, which happens every day and is not affected by you and I, okay? But this is a way of getting control. This is creative, a false problem. It's chaotic. We've got to get control of this. And they've brainwashed people into believing this. And so they come with their little standards, which basically gets control away from people and their freedoms away from people and the government having more control. That's what this is all about. It's not about the planet is either overpopulated or we're making too much carbon gas emissions, and we're going to destroy ourselves and destroy the planet. It's not about that. That's not what's happening. That's a fake problem. The issue is they want control. That's what this is all about. And now you're going to see the economic implementation of it and the control they will get from it. And again, if you don't comply, you're just going to be shamed, but shamed out of business. So they have figured out how that we could do this, shame people, and still put them out of business rather than trying to enact some legal thing over them. It's very clever, very clever. And it has the same effect. You put people out of business. And so instead of regulating them with law, we'll just shame you. And no one's going to want to do business with you, right? That's how they figured it out. And so basically our banking, our employment, our business, our livelihoods are all being pressured into compliance through fear of being shamed or ousted. And people not working with you, people not hiring you because you're not on the global warming initiative. You're not following wokeism. You're not following governance and things of that nature that we'll talk about, the ESG score. And so banks of all over the world have decided to follow this, okay? And they're implementing this framework as we speak right now. And some of the major banks. Again, this is part of the Great Reset on the economic side. But as you know, Trump avoided it. He tried to stop it, and that's why they were so mad at him. That's why they wanted him out of there. That's why they were willing to do what they did towards him. And now you have the Biden administration that's like rubber stamping everything the globalists want, everything that the reset, the Davos people want. So basically on Friday, the Great Reset people and the UN just received their support from the United States. And now, basically, the United States is going to be implementing this economic framework. This is pivotal. This is a crucial moment. This is where you're seeing goodbye to capitalism, okay? And basically, they're going to reset the U.S. economy to be an economy based on a fake issue, global warming, and it's going to be a resource economy, okay? So, again, what does the World Economic Forum want? What does the Great Reset want? It wants to take away, ultimately, everybody's ability to own private property, okay? And that's why they say in the Great Reset, you won't own anything by 2030. You'll just rent everything and basically turn everyone into slaves. And they're going to do this, convince people of the world not to own anything, to just rent everything for the sake of the planet, for the sake of carbon gas emissions, greenhouse gases. So they're going to convince people to give up their private property or either force them to, but that's where this is going. So now you have seen the first implementation, the stair step towards this, and it starts with shaming people, shaming businesses into compliance because they know they can't do it legally. So in this 40-page report called The Roadmap to Build a Climate Resilient Economy, you can read it for yourself. Go to documentcloud.org from the government website. You can read it there. It's all right there in front of everybody to read. It talks about restructuring the U.S. economy based on, obviously, this pseudo-climate change hoax. and basically said that, climate change is a national security all of a sudden. It's a national security. They've ramped it up to this level, that it's an existential threat. Oh, no, not Iran, not North Korea, not China, not Russia, but climate change. How stupid. And yet people will believe that. People will believe that. The majority of people believe this, okay? They're putting it on the level of an existential threat. Crazy. Well, anyway, the White House has directed the Secretary of the Treasury to begin this restructuring of our economy, under the Financial Stability Oversight Council, okay? And so it has all the tags of, okay, we're going to do this. And we got all the Secretary of Treasury and the Financial Stability Oversight Council to implement it. And so this report that came out by Biden, it notes this. This report lays out a roadmap for measuring, disclosing, managing, and mitigating climate-related financial risk across the economy, including the federal government, which also catalyzing public and private investment to seize the opportunity of a net zero clean energy future. Now, that's all terms basically saying, look, our economy is going to be based on clean energy and net zero carbon emissions, okay? So you will either have to comply with the climate hoax, save the planet tenets, basically found in ESG, environmental, social, and governance. We've talked about that before, which will be the markers in every company. Or if you don't comply with this, then you're going to have to explain why you don't comply, and then you will be shamed why you don't comply. People just won't do business with you. And the report basically states that the U.S. government has green-lighted the implementation of the Great Reset economically into America. That's what it is. And this is another big way of how they are going to destroy the free market system, not only here in America, but around the world. And basically what they're going to do is turn it into corporate fascism, along with the banking institutes involved in this corporate fascism. So the government can't implement it legally. So the government is going to the corporations and the banks to saying, you do what we can't do, and then we'll reward you at the end. And so it's corporate fascism. The big businesses, big tech, big banks are forcing this on people for compliance. And they'll say, well, it's voluntarily. You don't have to get involved in this. It's a volunteer situation. But yeah, if I don't volunteer, then I'm ousted. I can't get loans. I can't get a business loan. I can't get a mortgage loan. I can't get a loan for my car. I can't do business with other businesses. Yeah. But you have the freedom not to do it. That's not a choice. That's not freedom. You're not giving me a choice. It's either comply or I'll shame you and you die as a business. You die economically. That's what they're saying. And this report goes on to state, it says the failure of financial institutions to appropriately and adequately account for the measure these physical and transition risks threatens the competitiveness of the U.S. Companies and markets, the life savings and pensions of U.S. workers and families, and the ability of U.S. financial institutions to serve communities. In this effort, the federal government should lead by example by appropriately prioritizing federal investments and conducting prudent fiscal management. That's a bunch of gobbledygook. What are you talking about? This is what they're saying, that if we don't restructure the economy towards zero carbon emissions, to wind and solar power, to saving the planet, we're going to lose our economic competitiveness. Now, if anyone buys that, then they need to take an econ class in junior college and figure this one out. You're not going to just make us non-competitive by doing this. You're going to kill us. You're going to kill the economy by doing this. Because I can tell you this, if you're saying, because they did say that they're trying to do this to compete with China. Excuse me, China doesn't do anything about saving the planet. And you want to put more regulations on businesses here in America and in the Western society to compete with China, who doesn't comply with anything about saving the planet? you're basically setting up a scenario where China wins. China is beating us now economically. And if you put this on the U.S. or any Western country like Europe, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Canada, whatever, if you put this, that we got to comply with the regulations of ESG, environmental, social, and governance to save the planet, you'll kill the economy. But I think that's what they want to do, right? But they're saying that, oh, we got to be competitive. Anybody with any sense of micro or macroeconomics knows that this doesn't work. That's crazy talk. But see, they bank on the fact that people don't know economics 101. And they're going to say, well, we got to do this to be competitive. And people will nod their head and say, yeah, right. We got to save the planet to be economically competitive. It's stupid. It doesn't make any sense. But when something doesn't make sense, understand there's an underlying agenda. And the underlying agenda is to destroy the free market. That's the point. But people will believe the lie, okay? That's how gullible a lot of people are. So this was the Biden administration, the U.S. government, firing a shot across the bow to banks and to financial institutions, to big corporations, everybody in the economic sector, telling them, look, we want you to put pressure on anyone that doesn't comply with ESG. And ESG, all it stands for is environmental. So you want to save the planet, your score there. Your S stands for your social. So where are you at on social justice types of things? And G is your governance. In your governance of your company and of your business, do you practice affirmative action? Do you practice putting people on your board because they represent all the special groups out there in the world, all the rainbow groups out there, everything else? You've got to have those people on your board. Now, the whole thing about this is the ESG score is likened to China's social credit score. That if a business is good on it's saving the planet, it's good on its social justice Marxism, and it's good on their affirmative action on their boards and companies and whatnot, then you get a higher score, and then we can do business with you. And so that's what ESG is all about. So if you don't have a good score, then basically this is how you're going to be ousted out of the economy. They won't loan you any money. They won't do business with you, okay? Like I've mentioned, they'll freeze you out. They'll isolate you. And so you can never you never sue them because they never did anything illegal to you. They just said, I'm not going to do business with you. That's all, because based on your ESG score. And so they're forcing compliance without legally mandating compliance. And so if you don't comply, you confess that, basically. You have to write out what you want to say, why you don't do it, and then you go broke because everyone won't buy your product. And as Beck notes, and if you read the 40-page report, it mentions a law in France that they borrow a term from. It's called France's energy transition law, which uses the terms comply or explain. And basically outlines how every bank or company or lending institution needs to provide a full disclosure, full report to why they're not practicing ESG, why they're not trying to save the planet. Now, this phrase comes from the Cadbury Code of 1992, and it's been used in different countries like Germany, France, Belgium, Greece, even in Pakistan, Malaysia. But rather what it is comply or explain. Instead of setting out binding laws that come from the government and are enforced by government regulators with a code that people have to follow, it basically gives the companies the option to either comply with it, or if they don't comply, then explain publicly why they do not. And that's where the shame factor comes in. Well, why don't you want to save the planet? Why aren't you for social justice? Why aren't you for affirmative action? Why are you not? So you see, they out you. They shame you. That's what this does. And so basically, if a company deviates from the standard code of ESG, saving the planet, all that stuff, they're required to disclose the explanations publicly to market investors and consumers. Well, basically, they out you, right? So if the customers or investors do not accept what the company's explanations for not following ESG, then the investors will sell their shares, pull out, the customers won't buy their products, and basically the company will go broke. It's a shame tactic. And basically, this then creates what we call a market sanction rather than a legal one. And thus it avoids legal ramifications. So they've been pretty smart by doing something like this. They basically shame you out of business. That's what it's about. So really what this is they'll say it's a voluntary regulation, but really it isn't. Or they say you'll have the freedom to you don't have to comply, but you just be put out of business within a year. That's coercion, right? That's hijacking. That's holding someone hostage, basically. So what you're dealing with when you do a shame thing like this, it's based on attacking the person's reputation with a false morality. Okay? The false morality of saving the planet, the false morality of social justice, the false morality of affirmative action on various groups, not based on meritocracy, but based on the behavior of the individual, the look of the individual, whatever. And so it attacks you on your reputation, okay? And shames you to the world's standards, not the God's standards, but to the world's standards. And that's what it really does. And those who live by the world, live by the world's values, then they're going to be shamed into compliance, basically. That's what's happening. So there is a punitive element in it. And the punitive element is eventually we will shame you so bad, no one will want to do business with you. So here are some points in the report that I'm going to explain to you what they mean and the implications of it, okay? So you'll have this on the screen. The first point that they point out is incorporating climate-related financial risk into federal financial management. Now, first of all, they're saying in this that the federal government's going to manage this, okay? They're going to look at the financial risk of businesses and banks and companies. The federal government will manage this, and whether or not you comply. That's what they're talking about. The federal government is going to check whether you comply or not. Okay? The other point they say is this, using federal procurement to address climate-related financial risk. So what does that mean? Again, the federal government will look to see what kind of federal contracts are out there with businesses. And if they don't have ESG compliance, then you can't work with the federal government and you're going to lose the contract. And it's, again, comply or explain your shame. Or how about this next point? Protecting life savings and pensions from climate-related financial risk. And they keep saying climate-related financial risk as if we don't get this climate thing under control, it's going to risk us all financially. So they're trying to, again, make a false problem that because of global warming, you're at financial risk, which doesn't even make sense, but people will buy into this. And basically, look, they're going to say this, protecting your life savings and pensions. Look, you're going to lose your banking ability if you don't comply, is what they're saying. You're going to lose your insurance if you don't comply. That's what they're saying. You're going to lose your pension and savings if you don't comply and explain your shame. Well, again, how would they do this? Well, again, going to a digital currency, they could do this. They could see, look, man, your ESG score on a personal level does not match our banking institution's ESG model. We see by your social media that you are out of compliance, that you don't hold views that we hold. So, we might put a stop to your pension. We might have to tax your pension. We might have to tax your savings or whatever, or freeze it. You'll lose the ability to bank, basically. That's where this is going. It's not about protecting your savings and pensions. They're saying, look, if you don't comply, we'll affect your pension, we'll affect your savings, we'll affect your insurance. That's what they're saying. The other bullet point that they say is incorporating climate-related financial risks into federal lending and underwriting. Okay? Now, what they're wanting to do eventually is federalize any type of lending. First of all, you can see federal lending and underwriting, right? This is what they want the banks to comply with. That they don't want banks giving loans to people or companies who don't comply with saving the planet. They don't comply with the ESG score. And if you don't comply, then you have to explain your shame. And so they want to be involved in who gets loans and who doesn't. And only those who are ESG compliant get the loans. How about how does this affect VA lending programs? Well, if the banks don't adhere to ESG, then the vets don't get houses. That's how it works. So the bank has to do it. But what if the vet doesn't go along with the ESG? Then they don't get a loan. How about this bullet point? Building resilient infrastructure and communities. Again, you have to read into this and understand what they're trying to say. Look, they're going to say this. You're going to lose your business license if you don't comply. We just won't give you a business license. That's what they're talking about, infrastructure and communities. And you might be eventually ousted of your community, your business economic community, because you don't comply with ESG. You'll lose contracts if you're not ESG compliant. That's what they're saying. So basically, all of this is indirect coercion and indirect blackmail through shaming your reputation. And basically, eventually, it goes from the corporations, smaller businesses, and eventually it's going to hit you personally. That's where all this is going. And so we need to be aware of this. We need to understand what's going to happen economically to the United States and around the world. We're living in the shadows of the tribulation. And in the tribulation, the globalists and eventually the Antichrist control everything economically, right? So this is what the system is setting up to be. So the United States took its first deep step down into this awful water, this Antichrist lawlessness water, just last Friday by allowing our economy now to be based on the goals of the Babylonian whore, which is planet worship, social justice, which is an alternative morality to the Bible's morality, and then social justice through affirmative action type stuff, which the Bible does not advocate. The Bible advocates meritocracy. The Bible doesn't care what color your skin is. The Bible just says, look, you work hard, you deserve what you get. It's free market. The Bible pushes free market, but not in the Babylonian system. Okay, so this is going to hit us. And where it's going to hit us is economically. And you and I need to be prepared for that. You need to be prepared for living in a capped situation economically. You need to be prepared for maybe not being able to rise up in your company. You need to be prepared for that your social mobility upwards economically will hit a ceiling. And you may not make as much money as you once did. You have to be prepared for that. And again, we don't know how long we're here, but as long as we're here, you're going to see the economic system get worse and worse and worse. And you add in hyperinflation, you add in supply chain problems that they're having, and that's on purpose, by the way. And then all of a sudden, the prices of everything go up, your money goes down, and so you cease to be middle class, and you will go into the poverty level. Can you still exist at that level? Of course you can. But we need to talk about preparing for this. And so, spiritually, the way to prepare for this is to understand what the Lord will do for us. And so I want to point out the church of Smyrna to us as a way of understanding how to cope with all of this. And the church of Smyrna is the persecuted church. So we have to prepare for this economic persecution that's coming to all of us who won't comply with this. Okay? And I want to note this. And so Jesus says this in Revelation chapter 2, verse 8. It says, to the angel of the church in Smyrna, write, these things say the first and the last, who was dead and came to life. And the idea, what Jesus is using the situation of what happened to Smyrna. Smyrna eventually died out, and then it was resurrected again. And so Jesus is making an analogy with himself to the city of Smyrna. Smyrna was dead, and then it got revived again and came back to life. And same thing with Messiah. Messiah died on the cross, was buried, and rose on the third day, and came back to life. Messiah is the ultimate martyr, the ultimate witness, as he died for us, died for our sins. So he's telling you that he understands the price you and I are paying. We are going to lose our life. Not physically, that's not what I'm talking about. I mean, some people around the world, Christians, are losing their lives, but losing our life in the sense of losing it economically, losing it socially, right? We can lose our life that way. And so since we're talking economics, we can lose our life economically. And the church of Smyrna did. The church of Smyrna did lose their life economically and physically as well. But again, you can lose your life in many ways, socially, economically, physically, and all the other different categories, just like Messiah did. And so Messiah is saying, I understand what you are going through. I went through it myself, right? He gave up his life. He lost his life. And so in verse 9, he goes, I know your works in tribulation. So Messiah is telling you and I know what you're doing, I know your works, and I know the struggle you're under. He knows that we're in the last days. And he knows what we're seeing, right? So that brings us comfort to know that Messiah understands what we're going through. And back then, they were having Jew-on-Jew persecution. And by 90 AD, what was happening to the early church, the unbelieving Jews put out an edict called the Curse of MINIM, which forbid any Jewish Christian who claimed to be a Jew to enter the synagogue. So if you were a Jewish believer in the Messiah, you were not allowed to go in the synagogue. Well, Judaism was allowed under Roman law. So if you were kicked out of Judaism, the Christians were in a serious predicament because Rome did not officially allow you to exist. So it hurt them economically. It hurt them economically because the Jews would not do business with them if they were a follower of a Messiah. And so they got cut off economically. That's why the early church was in Jerusalem, was selling their properties and trying to raise money to help the believers in Jerusalem because they got cut off. They got cut off from society economically. And this is what was happening there in Smyrna as well. And then under Roman law, they couldn't exist as a legal religion. They were an illegal religion. And so they were in a serious economic predicament. And so they were disowned by their families. The other Jews disowned them. It was not an approved religion. And so they were left in nowhere's land. And that's what they lost everything economically. I don't know if you ever know the story, but church fathers remark on Nicodemus. Nicodemus was a very wealthy man, apparently. And because Nicodemus became a follower of Messiah, he lost everything economically. So by the time that Nicodemus dies, he dies as a pauper. But that's the price he paid economically for following the Lord. And it's the price you and I are going to pay for following the Lord as well. Anyway, the funny thing about this city It was extremely prosperous, Smyrna. It's one of the richest cities in Asia. And so when you had these believers' poverty in contrast with the riches, it really became a well-known contrast. And so their poverty was not a result of recession or economic conditions. It was a result from being pushed out of society, like you and I are having against us with what Biden just pushed there that we talked about. But anyway, their poverty then that the Messiah talks to them about, it's called complete destitution, really. It's the way you should interpret it. It's like that one basically only has the necessities of life, but nothing superfluous. So basically, you have enough to meet your needs, but that's it. So anyway, that's the kind of poverty that they were being hit by, and it could be the poverty that hits us as well. And anyway, these people, these Christians' livelihood were completely destroyed. Their property was seized. They were humiliated, stigmatized, slandered, harassed, physically assaulted. Many of them couldn't have prominent positions in society. Many were forced to menial labor, low-wage jobs. They gathered in caves, catacombs, and other hidden places to survive. If we are still here for some period of time before the rapture hits, then you could possibly see this. We're going to be stigmatized, slandered, harassed, our property seized. That's what happened to them. We're not above what happened to them. And so today, even right now, people are losing their jobs because they won't comply, and losing their business because they won't comply with the world system. They're being pushed out of society, being targeted. And ultimately, in the tribulation, all believers will be pushed out of society, for you won't be able to buy or sell without the mark of the beast, right? That's where it's going. And so in Smyrna, there was a smear campaign going on, and they were lying about these believers. Well, that's what our society is doing to us. It's a smear campaign, saying that we don't love everybody, that we don't care for the planet, that we don't. So basically, they're lying about us by saying we don't, we are the most hateful people on the planet. And they did the same thing with those Christians back then. They accused them of being cannibals, accused them of being infidel atheists because they wouldn't worship pagan gods. They said they were involved in sexual orgies. They said they were arsonists, all kinds of stuff. Haters of society, disloyal to Rome, and that's what they're saying about us today. They say we're disloyal to the government. They say, we're the haters of society. And that's, deplorables, phobes, unclean, racist, intolerant, xenophobes, anti-egalitarian, all this other stuff. They say anti-science, anti-medical, anti-technology, anti-progress, nationalistic, religious bigots, extremists, threat to national security. That's what they say about us. They said it about the Christians back then in Smyrna, and they say it about us today. And Jesus goes on and he says, those who say they are Jews and are not, but a synagogue of Satan. Basically, the principle is this, that they're going to be non-believers who think they're right with God and doing God's will, and they don't even know God, right? And they're going to claim that we don't know God, that we're the ones that don't know God, and that they do, and that they're smarter and kinder, more moral than us, more compassionate than us, and superior to us in every moral way, because they're tolerant and accepting and loving and all this other stuff. And that's what was happening to the church of Smyrna. They were saying, you guys are the most ungodly people, when they were the godly ones, and the ungodly thought they were godly. And that's what's happening in our society. They flipped everything. They flipped the narrative to where you and I are ungodly. And it's a lie, but this is what's happened. So Messiah says, do not fear any of those things which you are about to suffer. He's telling them basically, look, it's not going to get any easier. It's actually going to get harder for you. It's going to get more intense. And it's the same thing he says to us right now. Look, we're in the last days. It's not going to get easier. You're not going to return back to normal. It's actually going to get harder for people to be a Christian in Western society than it ever has been. It's going to get more intense. But then what's the command? Do not fear. It literally means fear nothing. No matter how small or how severe, the one who has overcome death says, you are to fear nothing. And so that's a command. So basically when Messiah gives us a command, don't fear, it means you do not have the right to be afraid. Okay, that puts it in a different perspective. I don't have a right to be afraid? No. Why? Because Messiah is in control. Messiah will take care of us. Well, Messiah will provide for us. That's why. And he says, indeed, the devil, and he mentions the devil because he wants you and I and the church of Smyrna to know who's behind all these people. Yes, it was people persecuting the church of Smyrna, but it was the devil inciting it. So all these people, like the Biden administration, the globalists, the bankers, the corporates, big corporations, big tech, they're being inspired by the devil. The devil is the one who's behind all of this. He is the one pushing everything. They are just the human pawns that are doing his will, whether they know it or not, that are persecuting you and I. So he's behind the scenes, and Jesus says, I want you to know that. It's not just them, it's who's behind them. And he goes, he's about to throw some of you into prison that you may be tested. And he's saying, look, concerning the future, you're going to go through a test. And that's what he's telling us. The church is being tested. Some of them would face prison, severe testing, even death. The same was true for us. Some of us are going to be tested to the point. Will you give up your job, or will you keep it out of fear? Will you take your stand knowing you're going to be ostracized from society and even your family? Will you do the right thing? So this is the test that's coming to all of us. Will we stand the test in light of all this of economic persecution? And then he basically says it's going to be for 10 days. And basically the idea is it's a short period of time. It's a season. The reference to 10 came in history, the 10 Roman persecutions that came upon Christians, official Roman persecutions. And basically he's saying the same thing to us. Look, you're going to go through a season of testing. I'm going to put the church through a season of testing to see where the church is really at, to show you and I where we're at spiritually, to strip away all of our crutches and all of our artificial support, our network of support, so it's just you and I basically relying on the Lord. That's what the time of testing is going to be about. And so we will go through a season of testing. We have to be prepared for that. Yes, the rapture could happen tonight. Absolutely. But what if we're still here a year from now, or 2 years, or 3 years, or 5 years? That means you have to gear up. You have to prepare spiritually. You have to live with two narratives, like I always said. Prepare for the rapture anytime, or also prepare that you're going to be here for a while. You have to have both aspects, both narratives at play. Messiah says, be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. Be faithful unto death is the idea of being loyal to the Messiah no matter what comes to us. See, the funny thing about Smyrna, it was known throughout the Roman world to be extremely loyal to Rome. Unlike most cities, it was extremely loyal. And it was the first city in the world to erect a temple to the goddess Roma in the spirit of Rome. And so the city's fidelity to Rome was famous in the ancient world. So Christ is saying this to the church, look, be loyal to me no matter what it costs. Don't give in. Don't compromise with these people. Don't succumb to the pressures that the Babylonian whore will put on you. Be loyal to me to the point of martyrdom. Continue to trust him. Be faithful to him. True to his word, even in the face of death. That's what he's asking for. And the reward is the crown of life. The crown of life is given to those who suffer well, those who endure persecution and are loyal and faithful to the Lord and obedient to the Lord during the persecution. It is not a crown given to those who compromise. It is not a crown given to those who are disloyal to the Lord in persecution. If you're disloyal and you compromise, you will lose the crown of life. It is only given to those who are loyal through persecution. And then he concludes like this. He says, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. He who overcomes shall not be hurt by the second death. So he's saying, look, if you want to hear this and apply it, then I'm going to give you a reward. Not only the crown of life, but he says, he who overcomes shall not be hurt by the second death. The overcoming is overcoming, abandoning the Lord and being disloyal to the Lord during persecution. What is this shall not be hurt by the second death? What is that? Well, you obviously know if you're saved, you're not going to go to hell. We know that. You're not going to be plunged into the lake of fire. But what does he mean that if you overcome this, you won't be hurt by the second death? Well, what you have to understand in this passage, it's a lactutis, and it's a literary device that John is employing. It's the affirming of a fact by denying its opposite. So it's like used for drawing emphasis. So John uses a double negative and draws attention to the crown of life and then away from the lake of fire reference, and drawing the reader to a stronger and opposite expression, the crown of life. So he's drawing attention to the crown of life as opposed to the lake of fire. So it's like saying this, the lactotes. We could use it in another phrase like this: it is no small problem that you have. So the idea is this: it negates the opposite idea. The affirmative idea is that the problem is very large, right? When you say that. So it's like saying this: the conquering Christian is as far above the experience level of eternal death as it is possible to be. The point is, the believer who overcomes, has victory in persecution, has far more awaiting him than just the mere escape of the lake of fire. That's what that promise is about. And that's a promise you and I need to hang our hats on during this period of time. Don't be afraid. And remember what the Lord said: when you see these things begin to happen, look up, lift up your heads, for your redemption draws near. Don't ever forget that. Hey, just a few things before we go. Make sure you have our Rumble and Vimeo accounts. And we waiting in the future for us to get our platform up on our website, and we'll be able to direct people to our website. And that place will be a place where our videos are unedited. Make sure you get on our text alert system. Just follow this link and you will put your information in there, your cell phone, and we will text alert you if something we need to notify you about. And then also be praying for us, because we're under a spiritual attack constantly. And pray to the Lord if you could help us out financially. If he puts it on your heart to help us out, we would definitely appreciate it. We need all the help we can get to keep our ministry going, to keep our church going, and to help us out in getting our permanent building, since we don't have one. So anyway, see if the Lord would guide you on that. But again, thank you for all the support you have given us. We thank you for all the help that you guys have given us. Pray for us. And again, if you need anything, email us. Let us know what we can do for you, and we will try to help you as much as possible. We don't want you to be out there alone without any resources. We want to make sure we can help you in any way, okay? God bless you, and we'll see you next time.